It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's another Football Friday here on Cougar Tracks as BYU gets ready to take on the Stanford Cardinal. Kickoff tomorrow at 8:15 p.m. on ESPN and right here on KSL News Radio. Pregame begins on News Radio at 6 o'clock. And let's dive into the matchup with our Football Friday preview here on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
1-0 BYU versus 0-1 Stanford. You look at this matchup on paper, BYU's got a decisive edge, but I think there's got to be context behind those numbers and stats. BYU, of course, as we know, dominated a bad Portland State football team. Stanford struggled 2 weeks ago against Hawaii in week 0. They're looking to get their first win of the season, where BYU is just looking to maintain the mojo, as Jay Hill discussed earlier in the week. But you look at some of the numbers of this game. BYU, of course, 69 points scoring offense through 1 week. They're tops, near the top in college football this week. Stanford, 20 points per game after that 20-point performance against Hawaii. They allowed 23 points. Meanwhile, BYU, pitching a shutout this season. They have not given up a point this year. An interesting stat on this game, first downs. BYU picked up 28 first downs against Portland State, to be expected against a bad FCS team. But Stanford, they had 21 first downs. We've talked about it throughout the week, but they had a lot of success eating up the clock, moving the chains, long drives, 20 plays, 15 plays, 10 plays. They had a lot of success. They just couldn't finish drives with points. And that's the issue for Stanford. But they've got a little bit of confidence that they can secure the football and move the chains. So that's going to be important for BYU. Rushing yardage for BYU last week, 468. Stanford, they like to run the football as well, 177. They've got Micah Ford, Cedric Irvin. Those are probably going to be the top two running backs for Stanford that they're going to turn to. Of course, for BYU, it's LJ Martin and Sione Moa. Rush defense, BYU, -5 rushing yards allowed. I've gained more yards on BYU's defense than anyone that they've faced thus far this season. Pretty impressive effort last week. Stanford rushing defense, only 96 yards allowed against Hawaii, but that was an air raid team, the Rainbow Warriors. Passing offense for BYU, 138 through the air. Stanford, 109. Obviously, context there, BYU, they shut it down after 2 quarters. It was done, 49-zip. Bear Bachmeier, your day's done. Whereas Stanford, they just didn't have much success at all through the air. You look at some of the advanced stats, only 27% success rate on passing downs Stanford had against Hawaii 2 weeks ago. And that typically means you're gaining at least half of the yardage needed to move the chains. That was Stanford, lack of success through the air. And that's why there's some real questions about Ben Gulbranson, the starting quarterback. Could they potentially make a change to Elijah Brown in game? We shall see. I know BYU at times has had struggles. Think about week 2 last year against an ACC team. Preston Stone was the starter for SMU, more of a drop-back passer. They made a change to a more run-oriented quarterback in Kevin Jennings. BYU had some adjusting early on. So it'll be interesting to see if there's some parallels here. Week 2 ACC team, does Stanford make a change at quarterback? Stanford's a pretty good football team, though. I do think in terms of talent, I was looking at the talent composite rankings on 24/7 Sports. And 24/7 Sports, they put together these talent rankings that just an aggregate of the star power of a given roster. Stanford ranks number 46. BYU, meanwhile, ranks number 70. And you look at Stanford's roster, they've got a handful of 4-star guys. CJ Williams, probably their top wide receiver, that if they do go to the air, he's going to be the one to keep an eye on. He's their highest rated player on their roster out of Mission Viejo, California, 6'1", 205-pound senior. He was a 4-star recruit. They've got an edge rusher and Tavarua Tafiti, number 11, he was a 4-star. They got some offensive linemen who have been 4-stars. Sam Roush, their talented tight end, 6'5", 260 pounds. He was a 4-star. And what I'm getting at, BYU has their share of 4-stars too. You know that. But to just assume that BYU is just going to show up and blow the doors off Stanford, I think is just a little bit naive. Now, I do think BYU can absolutely hammer Stanford. I do. I think they could win by, 3-4 touchdowns. It could happen. I'm not saying it's impossible, because this Stanford program, the last 5 to 6 years, as we've been discussing this week, it's been a losing culture. They don't know how to win games. And even Frank Reich had to address it earlier this week about the ability to win football games late and have that confidence to finish the job. Because if Stanford's going to win this game, it's going to come down to the wire. I don't look at Stanford blowing the doors off BYU. If Stanford wins this game, we're talking about a 17-14, maybe 20-17 game, and they're going to have to make some plays late to win it. They don't maybe have the confidence that they can get that done in that spot. Maybe Frank Reich has instilled that confidence since the bye week last week and extra time to prepare for BYU, but it creates an interesting dynamic to see, what Stanford's going to be. But they are a talented football team. They've got some individual personnel that's very talented. And defensively, as I noted, Tavarua Tafiti, Scotty Edwards, Matt Rose, their linebacker, who had 15 tackles last week. It's a tough defense, and it's kind of interesting coming into this game because BYU, the film that you look at last 2 weeks ago, in game 1, it was primarily against an air raid offense in Hawaii. It's hard to maybe project what they're going to do and attack BYU's offense. This was Aaron Roderick on that.
Good point. Difficult. Yeah, they played an air raid team who's very different than us on offense, and so all we can do is kind of guess about what their defense coordinator did, at Sac State, but they also have what they did last year at Stanford, and we don't know what we're going to see. So that's an advantage for them. So we have to just be squared away with what we're doing and make sure that we can make adjustments during the game.
Looking into the numbers deeper on Stanford, in their game against Hawaii, their offense, they were really good on first down. They gained at least 5 yards on 56% of their first down snaps. So they had success. And for BYU's defense, it will be big to put Stanford behind the sticks. Get them in 2nd 11. Get them in 2nd and 12, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8. Don't give them the chance to operate from 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3. I think that's going to be big in this game. BYU, on the flip side, their offense had 57% success rate on first downs last week. So BYU operated at a high level on first downs as well. Get Bear Bachmeier in those short yardage situations. I think that would be huge for BYU. 2 years ago, I remember when BYU was having their struggles in the Big 12, they were always facing 2nd and 3rd and longs. Being 2nd and manageable, and then that playbook can open up a little bit more. And with what we've seen from Bear Bachmeier, he feels pretty confident and comfortable within this offense. We'll talk more BYU Stanford coming up a little bit later here on Cougar Tracks. It's a game day eve, Football Friday, here on Cougar Tracks on KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper with you. Excited for tomorrow, BYU football in action against Stanford. I'm also excited for tonight, Football Friday. Ryder Lyons, BYU commit for the 2026 class. He will be in action this evening, taking on Mission Viejo High School in California. Whenever I think Mission Viejo, I think of the old recruiting picks. I think it was Mark Sanchez. He had that MV helmet. But Ryder Lyons taking on another California powerhouse in Mission Viejo. Kickoff for that one's at 8 o'clock. And Ryder is fresh off signing with Under Armour. Yesterday, he announced his endorsement with Under Armour, which very interesting just from the standpoint that BYU is a Nike school. Curious to see how that affects anything long-term as far as, can he wear Under Armour cleats when he gets to BYU down the road? We'll see. I'm curious to see how that all plays out. But Ryder Lyons going to be in action, and it was cool to see him with some big-time football names in that Under Armour endorsement partnership. He's a big-time athlete. I always say this, he's the king of aura. That's Ryder Lyons. And he's going to be in action for game number 3 for Folsom High School and Mission Viejo tonight at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Pacific. BYU Athletics announced some news that kind of went under the radar yesterday. Damon Dixon announced as BYU Athletics Chief of Staff. He's got a football background at the Naval Academy. He's just going to help with the day-to-day operations to lighten the load for BYU AD Brian Santiago. He's got an extensive background in the Navy, 28 years. Pretty impressive resume. So curious to see how all those workflows come together. But Santiago's added Dixon. He's added Travis Hansen. He's given pretty much everyone an associate AD title, including head football coach Kalani Sitake. A lot of good things happening in the leadership team for Brian Santiago and his staff. But I kind of thought that was an interesting addition, adding Damon Dixon as the chief of staff to the BYU athletic department, because it's a huge workload for these ADs. They just earlier this week, Santiago's on the call with Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark and other ADs talking about Barstool Sports, getting involved with the Big 12 Conference, so many different meetings from a conference-wide level. Have a guy like Damon Dixon to help fill the gaps, maybe in Provo and other aspects that Santiago can attack. So having that efficiency down, I think that was a good move by BYU to add Damon Dixon as their chief of staff. And then some other news on the BYU Big 12 front. Saw a WWE belt. BYU fans can buy a WWE title belt. BYU, would you pay $600 for this belt? I think I would. I might get that belt. It's pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie. It would be pretty cool to have that belt. What was also pretty cool is we rapid fire through some news and notes here on Cougar Tracks, here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, which again, every day Cougar Tracks is available. Appreciate all of you. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating and a review on the audio podcast feed. Subscribe to KSL Sports on YouTube. Like this video. It helps out the show a ton. College football is going to be changing. We know that. It's changed so much in the last 4 to 5 years. But it's potentially going to change even more. The transfer portal, which is a hot topic, and it was one that was a pressing topic at the Big 12 spring meetings back in May in Orlando. The transfer portal, the NCAA Oversight Football Committee is proposing only one transfer portal window in the recruiting calendar. And that transfer portal window would be January 2nd through January 11th. That means no December or spring portal windows in this proposal. It's going to go to a final vote before October 1st, but only one portal window. You know, my initial thought was, okay, it's kind of like basketball, where basketball only has one big window and it spans 5 weeks. But that's it. That's the only window. And then you build out your roster. I'm okay with January 2nd to 11th. That's what Craig Bowl, the AFCA, when they were down in Orlando, I was talking to the coaches. That's what they wanted, was January 2nd to the 12th, January 2nd to 11th, something like that. So this is what they wanted, the coaches. My only drawback to this is that I kind of like the spring window, because if you go through spring practices or if it evolves into OTAs and these players realize, hey, I'm not really getting the run that I was expecting, or maybe I'm falling completely out of the depth chart, it was a nice opportunity for guys to move on, go find a new landing spot. And in the case of BYU, if you don't have a spring portal window, you don't have Bear Bachmeier. You don't have Tiger Bachmeier. What would you do if you didn't have Bear Bachmeier? That spring portal window gave you Bear Bachmeier. If you didn't have that, you would only have McKay Hillstead and Trayson Bourget, who Aaron Roderick made it pretty clear, not better than a true freshman. So I'm kind of torn between this. I like it from the standpoint of it's done that period of time. After January 11th, no one's entering the portal, and you can really start to build out and forecast your roster. From a media, from a coach's perspective, from a booster, from a promotion standpoint, it's nice to then just kind of market the team for 2026 and beyond. Like, this is the group. These guys stayed on board. But at the same time, I look at it and I just think spring football and OTAs, what it's going to evolve into, that is such a critical piece to really establishing what your depth chart is going to look like in the fall. And some guys that might be viewed as potential impact guys or someone that you're going to look upon to have success, and then it just doesn't materialize and they fall out of the depth chart, well, it'd be great for them to have a chance to move on. And in an era of only 105 roster spots, which it will eventually get to, I know it's grandfathered right now, but eventually it's going to get to 105. I think you can adjust and fill some gaps. What if you have an injury in spring football? Then you can go fill the gaps and go get another player. I think it's nice for the coaches. It gives them a little bit more control of their roster, but I like the player movement. I like the movement. I'm okay with it. I know for fans, they think it's so taxing, but really, was it that taxing? Was it that hard? Barely anyone left at BYU this past portal window. The guys that left were pretty much, hey, probably not going to play. It's in your best interest to go find another spot. That's what those conversations pretty much were. No one really was willingly leaving outside of a Keelan Marion. And Keelan was a starter for Miami this past week in their game against Notre Dame. So it worked out for him. I'm torn on it. I just think that, to me, I would keep it as is. I think the December window, I hate that. I like January 2nd to 11th. Keep January 2nd to 11th, but also have that post-spring window too. Because you can add some really good players. For BYU, you got your QB1 in the spring window. If you don't have that, you're going with McKay, Hillstead, and Bourget, who were not good enough to beat a true freshman in the eyes of Aaron Roderick. So I'm torn. I know that's not the hot take. That's not the sound the alarm or, oh, this is so amazing. To me, I kind of liked the spring window. I thought you could really build up a roster that way. I like January. Ditching December is perfect. Freeing up December. And I like the recruiting proposal, too, of making December a dead period. Let these teams focus on their bowl game. It's going to make the bowl games more meaningful because bowl games took a massive hit with the transfer portal era because everyone wanted to get a head start on their portal activity and coaches were distracted. January 2nd to 11th, that's only 4 teams still left remaining. The rest of the country is ready to move on to the next year. And those teams that are in the top 4, they're going to be okay. Whoever they are, they've probably got the financials and the brands and the programs to navigate the portal and be okay. I think January 2nd to 11th is okay, but I want a spring window as well. I think the next thing I want to see on the football calendar, because this is a pressing deal, how the football calendar is structured is so important, and I think it's kind of been underrated and not discussed enough to fans. The football calendar needs to be fixed because December was absolutely awful. You had signing day, you had recruiting, you had official visits, you had all this stuff log jammed in December. It sucked. It was terrible. Getting the portal gone, step 1. Step 2, get recruiting as a dead period. I also want to see a point where recruits in their senior year of high school can just sign whenever. Signing day has already been destroyed. There's no more letter of intent program. In their senior year of high school, when that begins, set a certain date, maybe August 15th and on, you can sign whenever. That's what I want to see. So if you're a Ryder Lyons, you can just make it official, sign, and then Kalani can talk about you. That's what I want to see. If a guy is ready to just lock it down, shut down the recruitment, sign whenever. That's the next phase I want to see in the football recruiting calendar and just football calendar at large, because the signing day stuff, it's anticlimactic anymore. It's all pretty much done before July 4th. BYU is working on 2027 and beyond. There's still a few guys in 2026 that maybe they'll try to flip, things like that. But by all accounts, 2026 is in the bag. Now it's about 2027 and beyond and working on those classes, because you've only got really 11 months when you kind of put July 4th as that unofficial deadline. You got to get rolling on 2027 and beyond. But I want to see commits be able to sign whenever, beginning in their senior year of high school. That's the next evolution I want to see on the football calendar. Let's take our final timeout. It's interesting times, though. College football, that transfer portal, it seems on the surface to fans that it's awesome. But to me, I feel like you got to have two windows in football. To me, I think it's needed. I think the Big Ten wanted that, which is something I actually agree with. I think the Big Ten was, I don't usually say this, but I think they were spot on that. I wanted to see two windows, and maybe we still eventually do see that. Taking our final timeout, we'll get to a score prediction next here for Cougar Tracks, BYU versus Stanford, Game Day Eve, Football Friday, here on KSL Sports YouTube. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. We're one day away until BYU kicks off against the Stanford Cardinal. We will get the pregame started at 6 p.m. here on KSL News Radio. Myself and Kyle Ireland will hold it down on Cougar Sports Saturday beginning at noon as well. Let's dive in right now to my score prediction for the Cougs and the Cardinals.
Score prediction. Will BYU come out on top? It's time for Mitch's score prediction for the next game.
Score prediction time. BYU gets it done. I'm going to say BYU wins 24-10. I've been kind of teasing this number throughout the week. 24-10, the Cougs get it done over the Cardinal. I'm curious, Cougar Nation, would that be enough for you? On the heels of a 69-0 win, would that be glamorous enough for you as a fan to see 24-10? Look, I'm not trying to tell you Stanford's a juggernaut, okay? Other people will tell you their teams are juggernauts. I'm not saying Stanford is a juggernaut by any stretch, but I just think that Stanford's going to throw some new stuff at BYU. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of a filling out process, and maybe that filling out process, whereas Portland State's filling out was, 8 to 10 minutes, for Stanford, maybe that goes a quarter and a half. And you just think of the drives. It's not going to be many opportunities to get the football, because I think both teams can move the chains and take care of the football and time of possession. Would 24-10 be enough? To me, it would, because you're in a power conference and just stack up the wins. That's all that matters. But after 69-0, I think some would say, oh, they should win 52-0 or 52-10. I don't think Stanford's going to score many points. I just don't. I don't trust their quarterback situation. Their receiver, CJ Williams, is good. Caden High's not bad, but I just don't see much explosive playmaking ability through the air. On the ground, they got to account for Micah Ford, BYU's defense. Micah Ford and Cedric Irvin, they seem like the top two guys in that Week 0 game against Hawaii. But I fully trust BYU's defense. I think Keanu Tanavasa was excellent a week ago against Portland State, and he's not even getting discussed. He was all over the place getting into the backfield for Portland State. I would expect more of the same against Stanford. I think BYU comes away and wins the turnover battle. And I think that's going to be the difference to set up Bear Bachmeier with some short fields. But I think if you're expecting Bear to go 75, 80 yards every single drive against Stanford's defense, I don't look at that as being a recipe to put up a huge offensive output, in my opinion. I'd love to be proven wrong. I would love to see a high-powered fireworks offense, but still, I think that what you saw against Portland State, this offense is relatively vanilla, and that was by design. You didn't need to reveal much. But how much of this playbook is actually going to be unleashed with Bear Bachmeier in Week 2 now that power conference opponents and leveling up of the talent is stepping up? Is a freshman ready to handle everything that Aaron Roderick throws at him? Is it going to create situations where he's more prone to a mistake or two? So all those factors combined with BYU gets it done. The Cougs get it done. I think they're going to win 24-10. That's my score prediction for BYU versus Stanford. I think Will Farron's going to have probably a 50-plus field goal again. How good is he, by the way? I know that it's a joke by some to talk about a kicker, but what a weapon. What a luxury to have someone like Will Farron. And it was fun last week to hear Will Farron when his name got introduced in the starting lineup and the loud cheers from Cougar Nation. He is beloved. BYU fans absolutely love Will Farron for good reason. I mean, he's awesome. He's outstanding. I also look for LJ Martin to have a good game too. I think BYU turns to him early and often, and I think he's going to go for another career high. He had 131 last week, which was a career high, which felt weird to say that was a career high for LJ, considering he's been BYU's leading rusher the last 2 seasons, but 131 was the career high. I think he beats that mark this week against Stanford. I think he goes off for about maybe 23 carries, 144, something like that. I think LJ is going to have a good game in this one, and BYU is going to turn to him often in this contest. They got to get him in the end zone too. Last week, he did not find the end zone and get a touchdown. I think that changes this week, so I'm going to say LJ gets 2 touchdowns for BYU, and he leads the way for the Cougs. But again, my score prediction, BYU 24, Stanford 10. What is your score prediction? Share your comments in the KSL Sports YouTube page or text us 575-00 at KSL News Radio. Share your score prediction for BYU versus Stanford. Again, coverage tomorrow begins at noon with Cougar Sports Saturday. Myself and Kyle Ireland, we will have you covered. We'll have Riley Nilsson, former BYU quarterback, on the show and some additional interviews as well. And then we'll have coverage inside the stadium on KSLSports.com, 8:15 kick, BYU versus Stanford. And you can listen to the call right here on KSL News Radio and watch the game on ESPN. And then subscribe to Cougar Tracks so you can get the post-game reaction from me in Provo for BYU's game against Stanford. So subscribe to Cougar Tracks so you don't have to miss any episodes on the feed. Appreciate it. I've been enjoying this daily content schedule. 3 weeks in, continuing to ride high. I'm feeling like I'm in mid-season form, so let's do this thing. BYU and Stanford coming up tomorrow. It's right here on KSL Sports and KSL News Radio.